Hey, hope you're keeping well. Today I'm chatting with Anthony Andrews, who is a former pro rugby player, now yoga teacher and movement and mindset coach. He had to retire at 25 due to a catastrophic knee injury while playing in the English Championship. So a few places we could start, Anthony, and thanks a million for jumping on. But yeah, chat to me about that knee injury and having to step away.
Yeah, so I was playing for London Scottish in the English Championship. It was New Year's Day 2012, so midway through the season. Season was going well. Was starting most games, to be honest, in the Championship, and yeah, really feeling like I was finding my flow again back in the Championship. I played for London Welsh a few years prior, a couple of games in the Championship when I was young, and then got loaned out to Barking and played in the National Leagues for a few years. And then, yeah, this was my first season back in the Championship with London Scottish, and yeah, like it was a rainy day, boggy pitch. Like I remember warming up for the game and just going, "Oh, this is a slog." um, but we got into the game and it was a real competitive game. You know, I felt like I was having a really good match. And yeah, I think it was in the second half. I can't exactly remember. I made a we made a double tackle. So I was made the high tackle, so I tried to wrap up the ball, managed to stay on my feet, done the whole starfish hands off, and went to plant my left leg on the ground to go down for the jackal. But as I planted that left leg, I remember my boot slipping out to the side. At that exact moment, their tight head prop, who was a USA international, came in and hit me from one side. Somebody else hit me from the other side. And basically, my leg went one way, my body went the other way, and my knee completely laterally dislocated. Um, so the lower part of my leg was kind of like to the side. I'd snapped basically everything in my knee. And as the knee dislocated, it actually fractured the bone in my lower leg as well. Cartilage was blown, everything. And so yeah, like I remember at the time, the noise and the sensation of it was just completely rank. And yeah, I remember just lying back on the pitch with my hands on my face, trying to breathe, going like, "What the hell has just happened to me?" And then the physios ran on, the doctors ran on, and yeah, I'll never forget this. I think the team doctor at the time, because everyone was flapping around like, "What are we doing? What should we do?" They were trying to feel the pulse in my foot because apparently there's a main artery running down the leg. So if you lose the pulse in the foot, it could be a sign that there's damage to this main artery. So I remember the team doctor saying to everyone around, "Right, everyone, this is a limb-threatening injury." And I was like, "What the hell have I done?" So anyway, they looked at me. I looked up to the doctor and said, "Ant, we need to try and get the leg back into place um, now. So just to warn you, we're going to try and relocate the knee." So yeah, I think it was the physio from the other team tried to, yeah, basically put my knee back into joint on the pitch, and that was when the pain just hit me, and I was like screaming the stadium down. Apparently, I still speak to some teammates, and they were like, "And that was the most traumatic thing I think I've ever seen on the pitch." And anyway, they couldn't get it back into place. They got me on a stretcher. They tried again in the physio room in the stadium. Couldn't again relocate the knee because by that point my body had started to really tense up because of the pain. So yeah, I got in an ambulance, went to Leeds General Hospital, and eventually they managed to drug me up enough to relax my leg so they can get the leg back into alignment. And then yeah, went through a course of four major procedures, operations over the preceding 6 months, and yeah, worked with a physio for 2 years, relearning to walk, relearning to run, and yeah, I mean, I was 25, about to turn 26, really coming into my own as a player. Um, and yeah, in that moment, it was boom. It was done. It was all over, which was devastating, but also enlightening at the same time. Looking back, it was definitely a first step on this transformational journey I've been on ever since. And yeah, I don't want to say it was a necessary part of my journey, but it was a part that I now look back on as one that has actually really helped me in a weird way, um, and led me into doing the things that I do now, which things like teaching yoga, which there's no way in a million years, if that hadn't happened, I would have been doing that, or working as a holistic health coach and mindset coach. I wouldn't be in that place now, because I probably wouldn't have had to address the things that I've addressed because of that moment. That's given me the tools, the insights, the personal experience to now hold that space for other people going through challenges, whether that's challenges of transition, challenges of um, coming back from an injury, challenges of improving their health, improving their mindset. Um, so yeah, in a weird way, I'm grateful for that experience now.
Yeah, I understand you when you say that. And talk to me about, you mentioned there, getting answers or having to that journey. Talk to me more about that.
So I guess for about 5 or 6 years, I I ignored the signs for looking at certain things, looking at myself. Throughout the rehab process, I um, weirdly enjoyed it. I quite liked. I remember speaking to someone on a podcast the other day, and they said the same thing about the process of rehab was actually quite rewarding, because the progress that you make is crazy. Like, relearning to walk, relearning to run again. I remember the first time I ran post injury was about 15, 16 months later after the injury, and I was like, it was amazing. Like, um, and but once I got myself fit again after those 2 years, I got straight into rugby coaching. So I was involved in the game the whole time. And I guess looking back now, I was in the same kind of energy as I was as a player. So very much all or nothing, very much, do everything to win at all costs. And that included not looking after myself, physically, mentally. I was a very stressed coach, like a lot of pressure, put a lot of pressure on myself um, to work hard, and all these things that we learn as a rugby player, like, work hard and you'll get the results. So it's like, right, as a coach, I need to work even harder now because I'm in charge of a team. So that energy of working hard without any awareness of the importance of rest, for instance, the importance of um, recovery, downtime. I didn't understand that for a long time still, because it was the same as when I was a player. I understood this energy of, even with my training, like, I'm going to really beast my body so I can turn into a beast, so I can be a rugby player and take hits and, manage contacts and things like that. And yeah, I guess as a player, I didn't learn the value in rest, recovery, and ultimately looking after my mind and looking after my body a little bit better. I just saw myself and my body as a vehicle to to fire through things. So it was very much, all fire, all fiery energy, which I guess is a very kind of masculine energy, right? So I was in that energy for 5, 6 years post injury, and then I got to a point where I simply burnt out. I was head coach of a big rugby club. I was um, doing a teacher training course, and I was also running retreats as well. So I was doing so much, very much in the doing, busy, yang energy mode. And I remember saying to someone this the other day, that it was the school summer holidays had just finished, and I was running pre-season for my club, but during the day I literally didn't leave my house. I was single at the time as well, and I just laid in bed, laid on the couch, um, just completely exhausted, completely lost, to be honest with you. I had so many things on the external that were going well. I was a head coach, a level 3 coach, still a young coach, had success as a coach, was teaching, having an impact with hundreds of kids in a school. I was running retreats and helping um, you know facilitate people's transformations. And and I looked at myself and I was like, I can't even look after myself right now. um like, what is going on? Like, you know the- some I, something has to change, because this energy and this way of doing things that I'm currently doing, that I've always maybe done my whole life, is not serving me right now. Because, yeah, I felt crap. And I never reached out for any help or anything at this time, because that's not what I did back then. But then, yeah, in that summer, yeah, I guess that I did then start to maybe think, maybe I do need some help. Maybe I do need to speak to somebody. And I had this chance meeting with a guy that I was following online. I think you've had him on the podcast, Craig White. Um, and I was in Richmond, which is a part of London, along the river, drinking with my friend, just just chatting breeze, whatever. And Craig walks past the river. He's right in front of me, and I'm like, I recognize this guy. This is the guy that's into rugby, talks about things like yoga. Because I think the previous year I'd started doing a little bit of yoga to help manage myself, but not really fully into it. And yeah, I guess I followed that sign of, I was meant to see him. This was meant to be. So I reached out to him that next day, and we booked a call, and yeah, arranged a 1 day intensive. And yeah, ultimately he opened a doorway for me to explore myself and the different parts of myself which I didn't even really know existed, to be honest. And that was the parts of my mentality, my emotions, um and I guess from that day, that was in 2018. Fast forward to now, nearly 5 years on. um it's been an amazing journey where I've essentially opened myself up to looking at all the nooks and crannies that I could find about myself, from the relationships of my life, to the relationship with myself, the relationship to different parts of myself, to understanding myself. And yeah, it was that chance meeting and that serendipitous moment of, yeah, seeing a coach, a mentor, that opened me up. And I didn't know that's what I needed. I just felt that I needed something to help maybe instigate a change from that kind of dark place that I was in 2018, that summer.
Yeah, talk to me about that. So you mentioned there like doing so much externally, you're run retreats, teacher, head coach for a rugby team, you're ticking loads of boxes, and I'm sure a year or two before that you would have thought, if only I could do X, Y, and Z. And then you're doing X, Y, and Z. And then that leads you to, like you say, burning out and lying there on the couch and then, yeah, not knowing what's happening. And I think that's just so common with different people. Lots of people have certainly been there myself, and you're, yeah, just chasing the external things. Chat to me a bit about, and you mentioned their energy and yeah, just how are things different now?
So, as you were asking that question, this idea of balance came into my mind, and this idea of balancing forces and energies. So, like I sometimes wear this T-shirt um, because it helps remind me, and it helps, yeah, just frame these ideas. So I was very much in this fiery energy for most of my life, especially those years post injury. I felt like I still had something to prove. So it was all push, 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 force, force, force outcomes. Um, what Craig essentially opened the doorway to was this energy down here, which is the energy of the opposing force to the fire, which is the water. And this is the energy of essentially your emotions. Um, so, and I guess looking back to this time where I was in this fire energy, I've been thinking about this a lot recently about, so I talked to a lot of rugby dads about relationships with things like alcohol. And I see that this almost dependence on things like alcohol is kind of like trying to dampen down this fire element with some sort of fluid and water element. And looking back, I used to do that a hell of a lot. I used to drink to relax, in inverting commas, because I think maybe subconsciously it's like the my body, my being is craving that wateriness, that watery softness, that idea of flow. So I talk about the energies of force and flow. And I guess what's changed for me now is building that ability to tap into, use that fire element, because I don't want to sit here and say it's a wrong energy to have. It's not. It's a potent, powerful energy, but there is that understanding and the embodiment now of this sense of flow, and understanding that there's also a huge amount of power and and potential in that other side of the coin. You can call this energy more of a kind of feminine energy, that idea of rhythm and flow. So and that's ultimately what I think yoga has helped me with the most, because it's allowed me to really embody that energy. So if you think about going to the gym where you work hard, you do your conditioning, that's a very fiery yang energy. Whereas a yoga practice, you you're sitting still for a few minutes, you're connecting with the flow of your breath, you're moving your body in a more soft and gentle way, you're moving into stillness, into postures, and you're breathing, and you always finish with relaxation, a final pose where you literally just lay there and you're still. So yoga really started to teach me this other energy, which, yeah, now I enjoy going to the gym, I enjoy lifting weights, I enjoy the conditioning that I've always enjoyed, but I also really enjoy stepping into a yoga studio or practicing some really gentle movement, or connecting with nature, even swimming, connecting with water through outdoor swimming, and 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 not solely relying on this energy of force to do the things that I want to do in life. So whether that's running a business, whether that's training, whether that's um, managing my relationships, because I think ultimately this has really helped me with being a dad, like understanding this energy of flow and slowness and stillness, because you can't be in that fiery energy with a newborn baby, because a newborn baby is chilled. It's, well, for the most part, chilled. And um, so like that fiery energy is very, it's very difficult to connect with a very young child in that energy. Whereas if I feel grateful that I found practices like yoga before becoming a dad, because I speak to a lot of dads now. I work with a lot of rugby dads, and they tell me that they struggle to connect with the really young children. It's like, the amount of dads that have said to me, "Oh, the first 18 months, 2 years, you know, is a bit boring with kids. Wait till they're running around and you can actually do more, and they can do more." But I completely disagree now, because I found so much beauty and magic in those first few months, few years of yeah, because my boy's about to turn 2, and we've got another one on the way, and it's me embodying these energies that has allowed me to really reap the benefits of fatherhood, to yeah, to come back to what life is like now. I'm not as busy and as stressed and as pressured as I was. If I think back to that time in 2018 where I was a busy teacher, busy rugby coach, busy yoga and wellness retreat host, I wouldn't have had time to sit and be still with a newborn baby. um, I would have been too busy. I'd have been too, I would have had too much things to do. So, yeah, tapping into this energy of the water element, the earth element, the feminine energy has allowed me to slow down enough to connect with these, really young beings. And yeah, I'm like buzzing about the arrival of number two, which is, yeah, is well, any time now. My missus is 39 weeks pregnant, and yeah, I'm so excited. Whereas, I speak to a lot of dads, they're terrified of that time, because you know there's no better mirror than a child to let you know where you are potentially out of alignment. um, and it's triggering, but it's also, I speak to clients all the time. Your triggers are your doorways to growth ultimately. So yeah, I'm not sure what even your question was there, but hopefully that was an answer that was interesting and useful for people.
Yeah, no, it's so cool that you mentioned that, and how, yeah, for people listening, your t-shirt, there's, yeah, fire and water essentially on one side of it, and it's really interesting that you mentioned that, and that kind of push, go harder, work more, do more, energy, and that being the fire. And that's certainly what I would have understood when I was younger, growing up as a teenager, early 20s. The more you can do, and you get reward from that. You then, like you say, you become stronger physically. You play better rugby. You get lots and lots of rewards from it. So many rewards. And I've spoken to different people on here, and we can go. I know you've spoken about alcohol on Instagram, and you just mentioned it there. And Joe Van Niekerk was another one, the old South African umbrella, who spoke about his drinking. And when I think back, when I left school at the age of 17, I drank every single weekend, bar the weekend before the All Ireland League final, for 5, 6 years. And when I was in college, I would have been drinking more than once a week. and that's when I was playing underage farming and involved in stuff like that. But I would have been drinking twice a week, most weeks, three times. And for me back then, it makes sense now in that there are other things at play, but you're pushing so hard and you need a release from it. You need a release, like you say, that water energy. You need a release, and the alcohol gives you that release. It gives you that release. And it's funny then, you mentioned Craig White. Craig White said on the podcast that the body does not remember anything that happens when you're drinking. So that alcohol gives you, we'll say, the lubricant to then go dancing and do all this kind of stuff. And I'll be straight up honest that when I was 19, 20, not proud of it looking back now, but if someone was to say, go dancing when you're sober, I'd have said, no, that's gay. And behind that would have been insecurity. Not that I was gay or my best friend is gay, but like just and not that I knew anything, but it's feminine energy.
Yeah.
So I could have said if I was if I wasn't so ignorant and understood better, that I would have said, no, that's feminine energy. And the idea of feminine energy would have scared me because I got all my reward, all my footing in society, my acknowledgement from that fire energy. So the thought of me switching out of that scared me so much that I would never even imagine doing it when I was sober. But I suppose somewhere subconsciously, I enjoyed it so much when I was drunk. Don't get me wrong, after a match, dancing and being just, yeah, like letting that guard down and being loose and being free or whatever. Everyone knows exactly what it is, and being silly. And yeah, it's so funny, just the need for both. And yeah, I see it just last myself. When around 2018, I got depressed. My shoulder 6 years ago now when I was 25, and when I was kind of coming out of that, I was in Vancouver, and Joe Rogan, I used to listen to him all the time back then. He was doing hot yoga, and he explained the challenge of it, and I kind of thought, you know what, I liked the challenge. It wasn't about the flow, the slowing down. He was talking about how difficult it is, and my body was still quite banged up. I was getting out of it, but one of my friends was going to hot yoga, and I said, I'll go too because Joe Rogan went. And I went there, and I experienced that, exactly what you're saying, that flow, that different energy. And yeah, now it's something I'm going to bring more awareness to. But it's funny that about 2 months ago, I started going back to F45. After my concussion last year, I really couldn't lift for about 8 or 9 months because I would get headaches, and 10 months, 11 months. Anyway, I love training. Like you say, you like lifting weights. I love it because I do love it, that fire energy, that push. But it's really funny. About 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, subconsciously, I just started stretching after, and my body's good. But so now after a 45-minute session, I'll do 20 minutes stretching. And it's funny, I walk down those stairs after then feeling really loose and free. And whereas when I didn't, for the first 4 or 5 weeks, I was kind of tight and not just tight kind of physically in the muscles, but you just feel quite kind of a little bit tense, even though you've got that workout, you've got that blowout in, and you've got those endorphins. Yeah, you feel somewhat tense. So yeah, it's bringing awareness to the day to have the mix of both.
Yeah, so true. I've just come back to what we'll just maybe talk a little bit more about alcohol. Because something came into my mind as you were talking there again, and I think this has run through my mind a few times, but I've never actually said it. But you mentioned about the alcohol being a lubricant, and it's so true. Like my journey with dancing, very similar to you as well. Like I loved to dance when I was, well, throughout my rugby days, my early days as a youngster on rugby tours. In those early tours, you're probably 15, 16, where you maybe drink for the first time because there's a few cans available and blah, blah, blah. And I got a nickname, Billy Elliot. I don't know if you've ever heard of the film or seen the film. It's about this kid that dances, and throughout my teenage years, I was known as Billy after Billy Elliot. And it was this playful part of me that used to come out on the dance floor after drinking. And like you, back then, the thought of being able to open up without alcohol was again something that I never thought I'd be able to do. And I think that was a massive part of my healing journey. Was the year 2019, I decided to do a whole calendar year without drinking anything. And up to that point, I was a head coach of a rugby team, used to drink most weekends. I'd drunk like a lot throughout my rugby career, again, most weekends. Um, so I remember saying to people, I'm not going to drink for a year. And the amount of people, friends, family members that laughed when I said that, because it was so out of the ordinary, right? For a rugby lad to go, I'm not drinking for a year, even though I was still very much involved in rugby. Um, and there was a few moments, few events, like one of my best friend's wedding was that year, and all my mates were like, "Yeah, but you're going to drink for Shannaz's wedding, aren't you?" And I was like, "I don't think I am. No, in fact, I know I'm not. I'm not." And I had like one of the best nights ever. I was dancing. I was like, and I was like, shit, I don't need the alcohol. Like, and what I also wrote down here was this word playful. It's like bringing in this playful energy and feeling safe to bring in that playful energy. And yeah, to almost kind of challenge what Craig has said about the body not remembering. I think I think the body knows that the body craves that playfulness. The body craves that. It's almost a connection with your inner child that I think alcohol is a lubricant and does enable that to happen. So again, I genuinely believe that alcohol is um, is something used for people to access that childlike inner child playful state that they maybe feel unsafe to access as an adult. Um, but it's safe to do that when you've had a few drinks, because the next day you could go, yeah, I was drunk last night. I was acting a bit of an idiot. And you can almost kind of go, oh, I'm back to adult mode now. I can be this serious, you know, person, this serious adult. But the alcohol almost gives us that invitation to be playful, to be silly, and I've had a journey with alcohol, and I used to see it as a really bad thing. But looking back now, I'm actually really grateful that it did open that doorway for me to be playful in those times where I felt unsafe to be playful. Um, and yeah, and I guess getting to the place where you don't necessarily need that alcohol to tap into that is this journey of accessing these different energies within us. So yeah, um, yeah, I don't know how that lands for you.
Yeah,
Those thoughts.
yeah, I understand what you mean, and not to misquote Craig, but the way I'd have to listen back, but the way he said it did sound very. I agreed with it in that when, and for me it happens if I'm walking along and I'm feeling great and I start listening to some music that I love. Now, in the last year or two, or year, I don't know, the last period of time, I'll start nearly skipping. Like I'll just start moving different. I'm feeling great. The sun is out, and this music just goes through your body, and I'm just like,
Mm.
I'm just like dancing along, literally. And it's funny, it actually happened to me a couple of days ago, very recently. I was literally like that in my own world, and I saw a young lad that I coach, and for a split second, I got kind of embarrassed, but I wasn't. Like, I kind of got brought back into the real world. Put it that way. He was like waving at me, he was like waving at me, and then like and then I saw him in the corner of my eye, and I was like, oh, gee, I'm in the world here. You get me? I was just so in my own world, and then I was like, not that
Yeah.
I got embarrassed. I was kind of like, oh, gee, like kind of, yeah, brought back too. But essentially, there's a difference between that energy and when you're pissed drunk dancing.
Mm,
Do you get me?
yeah.
It's not the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
If you're drinking 7 days a week, dancing, and it's different. There's more, and it's
Yeah.
true. It's like when you're sober, it's like it's a life force. I don't know how to explain it, but and don't get me wrong, I'm not. When you were speaking there about being sober dancing, I'm not at a point personally where it's like I'm so free and open and this and that that if I were to go to a party that I'll just jump up and start dancing. Like I wouldn't because I just personally am there, and it's not to say like there will be a bit of I don't know um, restraint or restriction within me against that, but I certainly do at times when I'm just chilling or I don't know going about my day in
Yeah.
flow when that'll happen, and
Yeah.
yeah, so.
I think I know what Craig was getting at then, because yeah, when you are under the influence of, say, alcohol, I guess you are a little bit disembodied.
Mm,
You're not attached. You're not fully attached. Whereas that moment you were describing, where you were walking along listening to music, you were embodied,
mm,
um, in the moment. And I wrote down here when you were talking about, you was in your own world. You were actually in the present moment.
yeah,
You were
yeah,
in that flow state.
yeah,
And I guess under the influence of alcohol, although you may feel like you're like, "Whoa," in this kind of like moment, there is an element of you that's disconnected. Whereas in that flow state where you are fully embodied, that is basically this idea of the present moment, which is what we talk about in yoga, which is, I know, what you talk about with tapping into that idea of playing in the zone. It's like being in the zone, being in the flow state, being in the present moment. Like the outside world is almost like completely separate, because the outside world is, for the most part, is disembodied. The outside world is not connected. Their heads and bodies are not connected. Um, and yeah, I guess this has been the path of, and this is what yoga philosophy is all about. It's about finding the present moment by connecting the body and the mind, because what I say to people is the body is always present. The body is always in the present. The mind is often elsewhere. So the path of finding union or yoga, the balance between the body and the mind, is this path of bringing the mind back to the body. So we use tools like the breath, and music is another one, a powerful tool to help us bring ourselves into the present moment, because sound happens in the present moment. So that, in a yoga practice, there's often things like chanting the sound of Om, because when you make that sound, you delivering that sound and focusing on it means that you're focused on something that's happening now. Same as the breath. The breath happens now. You cannot breathe yesterday, or you can't breathe next week. So when you anchor your attention on the breath, you're anchoring your attention on something that's happening now. So you're anchoring your attention on the present moment. And in that place of presence, this is, maybe we'll lead on to talking about Dr. Joe Dispenza. In the place of the present moment, time, space collapses, or the rules change. And this is where we find we feel like, oh, I was in another world there. And you come back into the three-dimensional reality, where time and space plays by certain rules, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm having a conversation there. Oh, and my mind switched back into coach mode because I've seen this player that I've been coaching. So it's like, boom, that snapped you out of essentially the present moment and the flow state. Um, and yeah, and I guess maybe alcohol does, it gets you out of your head in some level, because the head is maybe so super busy during the week, super pressured, super in that fiery energy. Maybe it does bring you kind of down from that elevation, to some extent. But coming back to that idea of being disembodied, I think ultimately it is not a fully embodied experience being under the influence of alcohol. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and on the Joe Dispenza, interesting. Yeah, what you're saying there is very interesting, and yeah, of course, it's not because what you were saying there is essentially a lot of people's week, which was my week for a long time. What you just said there, the fiery in the head, da 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 da, and the alcohol can bring it down. Yes, that is what a lot of people's week is. In your head, fiery, awful during the week, stressed, with work, with life, with this, that, the other. And then at the weekend, the alcohol brings it down. And people, me included, up until a couple of years ago, that was me. Now, I wasn't so stressed about my work back in my early 20s or my college before that or anything. But there was an element of, yeah, there was definitely an element of it. And the alcohol after a match allowed me to slow down. And it's interesting you mentioned there Joe Dispenza, and for people listening before, we just briefly chatted about him. Both of us were interested. I shared on my story that I was reading his book, and I have been interested in his meditations for a while. And it's funny there when you relate what I was saying, in that when I was in my own world, and then I saw someone that I knew, and I went back into coach mode. You know what? It's funny you say that, and I go a level further. I didn't actually go back into coach mode, and this is deep, but I went back into being Brian Moylett, because
mm,
when you're in the present moment, and people who play rugby know this, or everyone knows this, when you're in the present moment, you're not associating with the self. Is that correct? Or sorry, yeah, you're not as Brian Moylett doesn't exist. Anthony Andrews doesn't exist. You're just conscious awareness, and that's what Joe Dispenza talks about: is conscious awareness. And that person brought me back to the three-dimensional world, like you say. I'm Brian Moyle, and once again, it's not that heck, I wasn't embarrassed. I was just like, I was very quickly brought back into, what here, oh, here I am. I'm here on the street in Christchurch, and that's a guy I know, and he's waving at me. Do I know him? Yeah, I do know him. And I start, yeah, here so that's all. Then boom, straight away, and that's something that's the flow state, and it's beautiful. And that's what anyone who's played sport will know. It's that feeling, like you say, time and space doesn't exist. It feels like time has slowed down, or you just have no awareness of it, and everything is great, and you feel like anything is possible as well. And
mm,
that can also happen if you're cutting the grass. It can happen. I don't have kids, but I you remember having a little baby brother, and like you say about being around kids, and it brings you into that as well, and or babies,
mm.
and you can get it when you're washing the dishes. Like I said, I got it when I was walking down the footpath, and yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing that you had that insight, and because Dr. Joe in his meditations talks about this idea of becoming nobody, no thing, no one, no time, um, and that is in the present moment. And yeah, and I guess that is the place where you enter in this state of play, because yeah, when you're say playing with a youngster, I was at a trampoline park with my little one last week, and I felt like I was a little child again. The way I was bouncing on the trampolines, like I completely forgot that I was a 37-year-old former rugby player that probably maybe shouldn't be bouncing as high as I was on the trampoline with my lower limb injury history. But I forgot all about that. I forgot all about that. I was so in that moment of play with this 2-year-old that I forgot completely who I was, and we lost all concept of time. And I guess what also came to mind when you were talking there was, you're so right. I think you said it on the podcast that we done together on my podcast, the Post Rugby podcast, that that sense of being in that flow state, sportsmen, rugby players had every Saturday. And I think that's why a lot of sportsmen and women, when they retire, they find it hard to replace that weekly activity of being so absorbed in the present moment. Um, because especially with a game like rugby, although there's a lot of downtime in terms of the ball going out of play, it's not like American football where there's like big gaps. It's like the ball goes out of play, but it's like you're straight into a line out, or there's a knock on, you're straight into a scrum. It's like boom, 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 boom. You're forced to be in the present moment. And especially with a game like rugby, if you're not in the present moment, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get whacked, or you're going to, completely miss a tackle, or lose track of where the ball is. And you're going to, you know, be at a disadvantage for your team. So rugby, I think, even especially contact sports, really like force you into the present moment. Again, it's that energy of fire, force. It's like whoa, like so. Trying to replace that when you retire, and I think this is where a lot of retired sportsmen get into things like CrossFit or MMA, or like another kind of physical, demanding sport that forces you into the present moment. Whereas I found yoga, which is still the same idea. Like you do a yoga class, you're completely in the zone. You forget about your body. Well, sometimes there's certain positions you get into in a yoga class where you can't not focus on your body because it hurts, right? Because our bodies tend to be quite locked up and tight as rugby players. Um, but it's that same idea of building a practice, building these little moments through the week where you're practicing this idea of being in the present moment. And this is where I saw yoga in those early days a few years ago, because one of my teachers was like this 50-odd-year-old man, and he moved like 10 times better than I did. And I was like in my early 30s. And I saw this practice as something that I could do for the rest of my life now. It's not something that has a shelf life like the game of rugby. So, but it still gives me that sense of timelessness, but without the the negative effects, I guess, from the injuries, from the beatings, from the the concussions, the head knocks, the dislocated knees. It's a more of a gentle, loving way into the present moment than, right, I'm going to smash you, so you have to focus on me.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's interesting in that another way, and I find it, I do F45, and that's very, like, that's kind of similar to CrossFit. It's kind of like CrossFit for people who are, I don't know, working in offices or something, or it's like 11, and I'm not working in an office, but it's kind of like a softer version of CrossFit. But you can go hard as. Don't get me wrong, you can go hard as. You're
Yeah,
just not doing Olympic lifts and that kind of stuff. You're just,
yeah,
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 it's kind of like without that. But
yeah.
it's funny. I find it so peaceful in that sometimes there are savage cardio workouts and there's great trainers in there, and know I like to be pushed, and they push me. And sometimes then at the end of the workout, I'll be lying in child's pose, like what Muslims when they're praying to Allah are lying in, that kind of position, and I'll just be lying in it, and I'll look at a little speck on the ground, and I'm just so, like we say, conscious awareness, because my body is so spent, and my mind is so spent also. Actually, that's it, that my mind is so
Yeah,
spent that I'm so exhausted that it's it's beautiful and it's peaceful,
yeah,
and that's exactly what a yoga session is. I remember the hot yoga sessions that I did in Vancouver, and the same place you get to. And it's funny, tying back to what you were speaking about at the start, with how your feelings and uncomfortable, I forget the word you used, triggers, and those just uncomfortable feelings and emotions and all of that are answers for you, that when examined, they give you answers. And when you sit with them and don't try and get away from them, they're challenging. But then when you look at them and understand why they're coming up, then they can give you answers. And a way in which I found this, I'm always a work in progress, and it's something that I, only found out about growth mindset about 5 years ago, when a couple of years ago. Just I suppose I did have one in many ways when I was younger, but in many ways I didn't, and I'm just learning about it more and more. And one for me, which was huge recently in the last year or so, big work on, was being on my phone less. And don't get me wrong, I'm still on my phone more than I would like. It's still a work in progress. But I said to myself, I'm not opening my phone for the first hour of the day, because I heard about the importance of it. And you have most willpower in the morning, and it's just a great way to start. So I did that. First hour of the day, didn't open my phone. And it's so, so challenging. Watch that, anyone. Try and not open your phone. But it's so peaceful. We just, what we were talking about, flow state, present moment, all that. You get that because, once again, Dr. Joe Dispenza speaks about your brain waves being slowed down when you're asleep, which they are from alpha to beta, I think. And then when you wake up, when you're about to go to sleep, you're in that, your brain waves are slowed down. And when you wake up, your brain waves are slowed down. And that's where you get these incredible insights before bed, and just as you're about to drift off, just as you wake up, incredible insights. And that is because your brain waves are slowed down. It's You open the door to the subconscious, and the subconscious has all the answers. I got one this morning, just with work, with something, and it just came to me. And anyway, to tie this up, yeah, putting away the phone, very difficult. And I've since gone 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and it's incredible. And I find that the second, and I'll be in flow. I'm writing a new book now, and just nearly done the first draft. It'll be a while yet, but I get into flow so easily in the mornings after F45. I come home, I don't even
mm,
shower. I just sit there and get into flow. But after an hour and a half, 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours of flow work, of writing, I'll then I'll be so at peace, and then I'll want the reward of the phone, and I'll feel like I deserve the reward, and I kind of probably do, most would say. But the second I open that phone, it's not just, it's no good, you know.
mm.
I've become so consciously aware of it, that dopamine, I can literally feel it now. And then, don't get me wrong, I'm 2 3 hours on my phone for the rest of the day. I'm not great, but yeah, I'd encourage anyone to try and do that. It's so incredible, so incredible. For me, I've just found it
Yeah.
so good.
And I think what you're saying about brainwaves there, just to link it to that use of phone, if you think about how much information is contained within this phone, even on one app, you go on Instagram, for instance, your brain is processing like a ridiculous amount of information, which is a very new thing for our brains. So when the brain has got a lot of things to process, it's in this state called beta brain waves. So the brain waves, because there's so much information to process, the brain is moving at a faster rate. Um, the brain also goes into that rate when we're in sort of a stress and survival mode, because it's processing lots of information to find safety ultimately. So the path to meditation and the process of meditation is shifting from these quick beta brain waves into an alpha brainwave state. And it's that kind of the one below that is delta and theta, and they're the states that you reach when you go to sleep, for instance. And you're so right in that it's these times between um, going to bed and waking up that we're transitioning from these slower brainwave patterns. So your deltas, your thetas, you're moving up in, say, in the morning, you're moving then up into more alpha. And then by the time you're fully awake, you're back into processing mode, full beta mode. So it's in these times that they say is the best time to meditate, because you're already moving between these brainwave states. So by focusing on, even just closing your eyes and focusing on your breath, you're reducing the amount of information your brain has to process in that moment. So that immediately is going to allow the brain waves to slow down. So that's why at the start of a yoga practice, you often will close the eyes and focus on your breath for a few minutes, because what that's actually doing is bringing you into the present moment, because the breath happens in the present moment, which we talked about earlier, but it's also starting to slow the brain waves down into this more kind of alpha brainwave pattern, which is a more relaxed state. And in that state, you can move, with a bit more freedom, fluidity, and you've got that potential to start opening up the body because the body's more relaxed. So, I talk about this idea in my course. I've just launched a 4-week flexibility course, and that flexibility is not about stretching. Flexibility is about this idea of letting go, and you can only do that when you're in a relaxed place. If you're in this kind of high beta thinking, oh, I want to force this muscle to stretch, it's not gonna relax, because it's in this elevated state. So by focusing on, slowing everything down, slowing your brain waves down, focusing on your breath, reducing the information that the brain has to process, you can tap into this more, they call it rest and digest, parasympathetic nervous system. And in that place, the body can relax, and then allows the body to open up. And when the body can open up, they talk about this in yoga all the time. There is no disconnection between the body and the mind. You open up the body, all of a sudden, you're opening up your mind to new opportunities, new possibilities, and that's the exciting byproduct of doing a yoga practice, which most people think, oh, it's about stretching. Yes, it is, but it's more about stretching your mind and your idea of what's possible for you. Um, so yeah, and I like this idea of no phones, and that's really helped me connect that, because I think every single person on the planet right now, our age, is addicted to their phones to some level. I am. I mean, I run an online business, and I find it hard to put that phone down at the end of the day and be fully present with the family sometimes. And I guess maybe one more thing to say on triggers is, we've noticed our little one become very interested in phones and screens recently, and that is quite triggering, because like, oh, we don't want them to have this relationship and be dependent on screens. But that trigger of us seeing that in them basically points to something within ourselves that we need to work on. And ultimately, that is what I help clients with is identifying their own triggers by um, noticing what triggers them within their closest relationships. What triggers them when they speak to their partner, when they speak to their parents, what happens within their kids. It's just like, oh, if that's really triggering you, that's because potentially there's something within you that maybe needs to be addressed within yourself. And what I've found fascinating is, say there's something within my partner that triggers me. Instead of trying to change her, I notice what that behavior is, make an impact in changing that within myself, and as a byproduct, she then will start to change. So, again, there's a big philosophy around how you change the world. It's not by trying to change everybody else, but it's changing yourself, and being that example. And yeah, the way you kind of find that level of freedom is by finding these triggers. One of my favorite quotes that I often share with clients is a Joseph Campbell quote: "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek." So it's these dark places that potentially really trigger us. Maybe there's been some real hard things that have happened in your life, dark traumas, big losses, things like that, that still trigger us, that by kind of leaning into those things, and maybe getting some support to work through them things. Those are the things that give us the greatest level of freedom, because it's those hard things that keep us anchored maybe in that past. And it's, yeah, coming back to the present moment. I think a lot of people find it hard to find the present moment because there's still all of these anchors and attachments to past experiences that still hold an energetic attachment within the body. So yeah, look, think, like, going back to what I talked about with that first meeting with Craig, is he helped me release some of that attachment to some of these emotions that I held from the past, which then freed up my energy to actually be in the present moment and find that present moment. Um, so yeah, again, I don't even know that was a question there, but it's so interesting when you just allow yourself to speak, and things flow through you, right? It's yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, and it's something I've found with podcasting and this and that. When you just say there, it's interesting when you speak and allow things to flow through you. In that, when I started out with the podcast, you might have had a similar experience, but I would have had a lot of questions written out. Geez, I'd know what you eat for breakfast, and there's an element of course, you do need to do your research to an extent, but I wasn't allowing it to flow. Like, you could talk about something, and then I'll say, and when you were 19 and this, and it's just, and that's out of, that was out of fear, because I was early doors, fear of making mistakes and all that. And yeah, the best podcasts I find, what I do, are when there's a flow, and I've literally just looked down at a sheet for the first time there about 30 seconds ago to jot down two notes in, and we've been over an hour, and yeah, very much in the flow. And when you were speaking there, a couple of things came to mind. I love that quote from Joseph Campbell, you say about the dark cave having the key to the treasure chest, and a couple of ones came to mind for me. Wayne Dyer, funny one, and this is was so true for me for a lot of my life too. It was that everyone else was the reason things weren't great for me was because of everyone else. And Wayne Dyer said, I think it was him, that if you think other people are the problem, you're going to have to send the whole world to a psychiatrist to get well. Good luck with that. And it's so true, It's like, oh, he did this, she did this, they did that, da 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 da, and it's like, no, no, it's you. And another one he said was, like you mentioned with your wife, when you change, and this goes further than that, but, or sorry, your partner, but another one was, when you change the way you look at something, the thing you look at changes.
Mm.
And that's so true. And the last one that came
Mm.
to my mind when you were speaking was with this bringing awareness to um, uncomfortable feelings, or like you say about the that's where the key is, or to the treasure chest. And spirituality, like, what does it mean? It's, I was probably learning about uh, going within, or trying to learn more about myself 5 6 years ago, and I'm realizing what's a spiritual practice, whatever. But Eckhart Tolle had said a great one. I only heard him say this recently, and if anyone wants to become more spiritual or whatever, but he said that when bring awareness to those uncomfortable feelings, and when you find yourself looking for a vice to get away from it, put a 3-minute timer on your watch, and that
Mm.
is your spiritual practice. So for me, every day, many times, is to reach for my phone. After I open it that first time, many times I find that urge to reach for the phone, and most times I reach for it, or a lot of times I reach for it. For other people, it'll be you know, to take a drink of alcohol, or smoke with a weed, or turn on Netflix when you said you weren't going to watch Netflix, or order the takeaway when you said you were going to eat healthily. Or those are all the vices, or smoke a vape, or whatever it is, or watch porn, or whatever, you name it. You need to bring awareness in that moment to that feeling. And you have to put a timer on it. And that's the spiritual practice. And it's so true. And it's like anything, it's difficult, but it's rewarding. Going to the gym and working out, it's difficult. It's very difficult, but it's rewarding, and you grow from it.
Mm.
Everything is difficult, but it's rewarding. Nothing's easy to an extent.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing I wrote down here as you were speaking about that was this idea of distraction. We distract ourselves. Like, I love that idea of creating that 3-minute space, um, because in that 3-minute space, you could potentially ask yourself, "What am I distracting myself from?"
Mm,
And that question can be quite hard to answer if you know but other times that answer is not as bad as you think it would be. Sometimes we distract ourselves, create that busyness to ultimately stop us from looking in these caves. it, a distraction, I wrote down, distractions equals creating safety, because the distraction ultimately lead you away from dealing with these uncomfortable things, these uncomfortable feelings, memories, whatever it is within the system. So by keeping yourself on this constant state of getting distracted by being busy, whether that's your phone, Netflix, drink, drugs, whatever it is, you're constantly just keeping yourself away from these things that your ego thinks are going to be too hard to deal with in this moment. And maybe for the most part they are, because maybe you don't have a safe environment where you can explore these things that are maybe in your space somewhere, that are wanting to maybe come to light. So that this is where I think the power of having a mentor or a coach to hold a space for you to safely explore these things, especially if they're really hard things. Some people have dealt with big losses and big traumas, right? That it's understandable for you to distract. I get it. So it's not putting any judgment on that distraction. It's bringing compassion to that distraction and going, shit, yeah, I'm going on my phone a lot because I don't want to deal with that loss, or I don't want to deal with that. Coming back to the rugby player, that loss of identity that I've had since retiring from playing. It's easier for me, or my body thinks, or my no, sorry, my mind thinks it's easier for me to just distract and not deal with that. But there's this other part of you that's longing for you to be still for a moment, to sit with that discomfort. So, set that timer and just sit with that, that discomfort of, is it being, I felt it myself over the last few weeks where I've been launching this course. I've been procrastinating going on my phone more because the idea of putting myself out there and with a course that people are going to sign up to watch me and to listen to me, part of me is terrified of that. So that part of me wants to distract and not let that happen. But there's the inner part of me that's going, and people need this, and people are going to get a lot from this. This is part of your growth, your spiritual development, to express yourself, to express your truth, to share your gifts with the world. So that part of me is going, do it. The other part of me that wants to keep me safe is going, oh, don't do it. Go on your phone, procrastinate another day. Do it next week. Do it when the baby arrives. Do it when this happens. Do it when you're ready. But it's like, right, the spiritual practice then is sitting in that conflict and, yeah, dampening the noise to probably both sides, and coming into this place of stillness and balance and going, and just pausing and just seeing what happens. And I guarantee you, it's not going to be as bad as, maybe your mind thinks it's going to be. It's going to be potentially liberating, because that's ultimately been what I've gone through over the last 5-6 years, is sitting in that discomfort. And yes, there's been times when really challenging things came up, like on the Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat. Some real deep trauma and healing came up for me in that moment to sit with. And it was hard. It was upsetting. I went through some major emotions on that retreat. But afterwards, boom, I felt liberated. Boom, I felt so much more freedom. Boom, I felt so much more peace and presence, because there's this part of me that's not anchored and pulling me away from the present moment anymore. Not to say I'm
Mm,
sitting here fully healed, fully present, but there's a big, massive thing that's been, just not completely dissolved, but it's, yeah, dealing with these things is uncomfortable. But I ask the question to my clients: is it, what you're doing right now, the alcohol addiction, the inability to be present, the inability to connect with your children? That's pretty hard right now as well. Um, so yeah.
yeah, brilliant. Yeah, like you say, liberating for sure. So true. Um, it is, and yeah, once again, I'm not sitting here this Buddhist monk or anything either. But it's when you do bring that awareness to it, and every day there's opportunities. Like I know for me, every day there's so many opportunities. Always comes up, and yeah, you feel lighter
Mm.
and freer, and it is, yeah, it's so worth it. And it's funny when you mentioned about putting out your course, and I find that I see it in myself too. I'll just start getting really busy, and then I'll be like, I'll cook food. I always go cook food. I always do, and then I'll eat a bit of food, and I'll eat
Yeah.
it, and then I'll get more, and then I'll be like, I'll have a bowl of Weetabix now, and and then yeah, sometimes then I'm too full, and I'm like, sure, I'm so full now, I can't, I can't do it, or it's funny.
Yeah, it's so annoying though, because like when you do build that awareness, and you do start to kind of notice these things in real time, A, it can be liberating, but B, it's also like, oh man, can I not have a little break from kind of looking at these things, or do you know what I mean? So it's like it is like you said a few times, it is a never ending process, and journey, because I don't think any of us are ever going to reach this complete enlightened state where we're like, pure light and whatever else. But it's yeah, but I guess the thing to say on that is, like, it doesn't always have to be a constant work in progress. There's always work to do, but I guess for me, if I could give any advice to anybody about this, maybe they're starting this journey, is to find elements of play and enjoyment along the way with this journey, because it can become a journey that is a constant looking for that. I was stuck in it for a while. I mentioned that quote about the cave. I was like, I'm once I found that next cave, I'm like, there's got to be a darker cave. There's got to be a darker cave that I can find. So it's easy to slip into that um, mode of constantly looking for these healing opportunities, which again becomes another form of distraction
Mm,
in a weird kind of way. So it's balancing again. It's this word balance, which I love, which is about looking at ourselves, but it's also about being ourselves at the same time. So because again, it can take you out the present moment by looking at these things, but looking at these things helps us find the present moment as well. So it's a weird kind of cycle. But yeah, I guess the main point there was, yeah, to find the fun, to find the joy, to find the people that you can share this journey with as well. Because you know I've got groups that I connect with that we laugh about some of the crazy things that we've done, and healings that have happened, things that we've seen in meditations, just like, whoa, like, have you ever seen this in a meditation? Like, have you ever experienced this? Has your body ever started like shaking in a meditation before? Like, bloody hell, yeah, that's happened to me. Like, so I think it's also really important to have a sense of yeah, community around you, so it kind of keeps you, yeah, keeps you sane, I guess.
mm,
So this is why I think it's refreshing to have conversations like you, like former rugby players, and we can have these chats, like, because I've been at this for a while now, and I'm only now starting to find people that really resonate, and that I can go there with these things. For a long time, I felt like I was going crazy and on my own in the rugby world addressing these things, and then people like yourself, and I don't know if you ever listened to Johnny Wilkinson's podcast, I Am. It's amazing, like, to have someone like him, like an early role model of mine in the rugby community, talking about these spiritual concepts, and interviewing some of the people that I have read and learnt from. And yeah, it's I think, yeah, the rugby world and the rugby people are starting to maybe be a bit more open to having these conversations, for sure.
And I think we'll wrap it up now shortly, but we've gone on for a while. But I think yeah, look, you. It helps you overall. It's like we were talking about earlier, the fire, and you think that it's all about the fire, but it's not. And you know, yeah, just bringing more balance to it. It's You're not going to lose the fire by not being in it all the time, and that's
Mm.
something that can scare people, or might scare people. And I remember when I after COVID went back playing, and when I was feeling really good and mentally, physically, and went back playing in Canada and was playing the best rugby of my life, albeit at a lower level. Um, yeah, like I had very much awareness of this, but the I was playing with a sense of wanting to explore my potential and wanting to just all the good things that came with it. Like, like now I'm sure you'd love to play a game. Like I'd love to play a game now. Just there's nothing like it. Like anyone who plays, who has played rugby at any level, will know that there's nothing like it. And so when I went back playing, I loved that kind of stepping into the arena, being that warrior, um, doing that, and then with my training, being disciplined, and I loved all that. And look, I loved, geez, I just loved it so much that last 2 years before I'd stopped the concussion, and that's really when I started off field rugby, when I started coaching players one on one, when I started it all. I was just like, wow. I felt like I had just cracked the code, and I didn't understand that you could play so well, so consistently, enjoy so much. Just it was mind blowing, and I felt I got a bit of that understanding, but it was about 10 years too late for me. So I remember at first I was like the moment. I remember there was literally a moment where I was like, "Fuck!" Like if only I knew this 10 years ago. Jesus, how different would things be? And it was just a moment, and it was like, I was at a place then, I was whatever, 28 probably, and I was like, look, everything happens for a reason, it is what it is, and just redirect that energy into helping other rugby players. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's ultimately what you're doing now, right? Is rather than that version of you knowing this 10 years ago, you're helping the younger versions of rugby players, the school kids, the young professionals, whatever it is, to help tap into these ideas. And I think ultimately it's what inspires me for sure. I'm sure it inspires you. Is that's why we're sitting here doing things like this, right? Is so we can share this wisdom that we've acquired since you know not playing or not playing for a while, and yes, inspiring the next generation of rugby player that they can still bring that fire, but understanding that there's so much potential and power in the other side of the coin as well. So yeah, no, it's super inspiring what you're doing, and I really appreciate coming onto your podcast today. It's been definitely uh, a catalyst for me starting my podcast again earlier this year, is seeing podcasts like yours out there, and having these conversations that 2 years ago when I started my podcast I was like, nobody wants to hear this stuff. But so thank you for inspiring me to step back into this world.
Oh, good man. Cheers. Thanks so much, Mil. And I suppose, we leave it there. So people can find you, Anthony, on Instagram at the Rugby Yogi for the podcast, the Post Rugby Pod. And thanks for having me on as well a few weeks back. And and then through your Instagram, I suppose, is that the best place?
Yeah, Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm active mostly on those two channels. So Anthony Andrews on LinkedIn, or the Rugby Yogi #4 on Instagram.
Brilliant.